Welcome to The Gathering, a podcast for artists and creatives from Arts Lancashire. This is one of 2 episodes commissioned especially for the Lancashire Arts Exchange 2021.
It features a conversation with Krissi Musiol, a theatre maker based in Preston and Manchester. Krissi's current work explores motherhood, the maternal body as archive, and labour in terms of birth and in terms of work.
Hello, I'm Krissi Musiol. I'm a performance maker, lecturer and mother based in Manchester and Preston.
Krissi, you are one of our commissioned artists for the Lancashire Arts Exchange.
Your piece, Carried, which is an audio walk, was part of our programme.
And that piece actually forms a wider series of work that you've created called Maternal Matters. Did you conceive all of the works at once, or did one come from the other, and how did you develop that wider piece of work?
Yeah, I didn't start the whole process thinking it was going to be a wider body of work. I began with the first show, which was called Work It Out, and I began that when I was on maternity leave in 2017, and I found that I was kind of simultaneously exhausted and hyper aware at the same time. And I didn't intend to make work whilst on maternity leave. I thought that I would be concentrating on having a baby and be doing that. And I didn't put any pressure on myself to be making work, to be practicing during that time. However, I was awake all the time. And I'm a bad sleeper in general. And someone said to me, when you have a baby, you won't have insomnia anymore because you'll be so tired that you'll just sleep. And of course, there's that saying, sleep when the baby sleeps. And that just didn't happen to me at all, unfortunately. So I would get the baby to sleep. And that's where you're supposed to get your 2-hour window of sleep. And I would just be lying awake, thinking the baby's going to wake up any minute now. And of course, the baby didn't, but I would just be awake all that time. So I found myself awake at long periods during the night. And of course, the baby was awake early in the morning, as babies are. And I had the news on a lot, as the 24-hour BBC News as a kind of companion during these times of having a baby that doesn't talk back to you. During those times, I was processing this thing that I had worked out of my body. And I'd been working up for 9 months of how I was going to work this thing out of my body. And then I was working all of this time once I'd had the baby, of working out how to look after the baby, working out what to do with the baby. I had no idea how to change a nappy. I had no idea how to breastfeed. I now realise that no first mums do. And it's not just me, but I was kind of clueless. So I was trying to work all this out. And I was very conscious of all these things I was working out whilst the news was simultaneously rolling on in the background and the world outside was ticking on. And I was in this little cocoon in my house, not going out in the first few weeks. And I was thinking about how I'm going to bringing this new life into this world, which is going on outside. Brexit was happening and Trump was elected and the Manchester bombings happened and Grenfell Tower was on fire. And there were all these massive things going on in the world. And I was holding this really vulnerable, small thing that I was nurturing and raising to go into this world outside, whilst also trying to nurture myself. So I ended up creating this show, Work It Out, and I showed a scratch of it in September. My child was born in February, and by September I had this 20-minute scratch.
Oh, wow.
Which I showed. So I quite enjoyed it. Yeah, I quite enjoyed it. And of course, it was because I had this ridiculous amount of energy and this tired energy, this buzzing energy of all these things that I wanted to say. And I made this show about the things I wanted to say, but it was also very much about the body, about the pressures on the body, how my body had changed, the shock of what had happened on my body, the pain of what had happened on my body. And I had actually quite a serene labour, actually. And like most mothers, I was afraid of it. But when I look back on that pain, I actually look back on it quite fondly. And it was very dark by choice, and it was very quiet. There was no shouting and screaming, not like how it was on the TV. And I asked for people to not talk to me, my partner, the midwives. I said, I don't want cheerleaders. I just want to be in silence. So that part of it was actually very serene, but I wasn't prepared for the pain that happened afterwards. And I found the first, I mean, I counted every day, the first 100 days I counted post birth. I found it incredibly painful on the body and the exhaustion and the mind. So I wanted to explore that body as an archive of that pain. And I was really conscious of this kind of spring back into shape and this policing of women's bodies that I wanted to reject, but I also was very mindful of as well. I wanted to show capability to the outside world. I wanted to show myself as I'm fine, I'm coping, I'm managing this. And I wasn't particularly struggling. It wasn't that I was not coping, but this desire to show, even when just my mum came round to help.
Why do you think that was? I recognise that totally, very similar for myself, but why do you think that happened?
Well, I'm fascinated by it because it's something that I reject, and yet I still felt it, this pressure that no one was putting on me, and yet I felt it. So where do I feel that from? I don't know. How is that so ingrained to feel it, but to then acknowledge it and be able to actively reject it and say, no, I won't police, I won't allow my body to be policed. But also a kind of, I wonder whether there's something in this new well-being mindfulness promotion, which often centers white, straight, able-bodied people to aspire to this Gwyneth Paltrow goop, wholesome mother. And of course I want to be healthy. And of course I want to promote healthy habits in my child and in my family. Of course I do. But there's not only one type of body. And I think it has something about being a performer attached to it as well, because as a performer, we want to instill this kind of presence and sharpness. But that doesn't mean you have to look a certain way. You could still have a sharp body without it being a certain size. That's still possible. Of course it is. You can have presence without being a size 10. So it was this interesting attempt of like working things out of my body and also trying to work out my body, but without it becoming a thing where, oh, it's because I want to look a certain way, because I do reject that. But I was also wanting to exhaust my body, was also another way of like working out to exhaust my body. I remember going to some mothers.
So you could sleep?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I went to some sort of like mothers exercise class where you go and work out with other mothers. And basically I found that the mothers, I didn't know anyone there. My mothers all like chatted whilst doing it, which is great because it's a sense of community and they're not there to take it seriously as such. It's a time for them, and that's really important. But I got home and had to go for a run because I still had all of this energy. So it's a tricky thing. I feel now my body's like really lethargic and really lacking in energy, and I can't find that motivation. It's about motivation as well, how to find that motivation to work out.
Yeah, I totally recognise everything that you're saying here, and I think a lot of people will do who have birthed a child and gone through that experience of, as you say, getting pregnant in the first place, but then also worrying about, oh my God, what have I just done? I've actually got to get this thing out of me, and that is definitely going to hurt.
Yeah.
And then not really realising exactly, people tell you, your life changes, and you can't underestimate that really. And in some ways I think it's better to be clueless, because if you actually knew.
Yeah. And it's a thing, as you say, it's a thing you can't comprehend. You just don't know what it is. You just can't comprehend what a change it's going to be and what that responsibility is and how awesome it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really love that phrase you said, the body is an archive of pain. That's a fantastic way to look at it. It's also just a fantastic, beautiful phrase as well. So what was Work It Out?
It developed into a 1-hour studio piece to be delivered in a black box theatre with an end-on audience. Motivation, as I was saying, was really key to it. As I developed writing it, and the writing and the making process was a real pleasure for me as a mother, to take that time to go and do it. It wasn't hard. And that, I suppose, is a really key thing, that if it shouldn't be hard and a struggle, because no one's making you do it, and that you've got enough on your plate at home. So it was actually a real pleasure to do. And I wrote in a guest performer's role as a birthing partner, a cheerleader, a personal trainer, a motivator, who's on stage with me, kind of egging me on as I go to try and like get me through it. I chose this amazing performer, Nikki Hobday, who's also a personal trainer as well as a performer.
Oh, wow.
And she works as a personal trainer, but she also works with queer bodies in terms of that perception of what it's like in a gym and who's welcome in those spaces. And so she was a brilliant person to have as a guest. And I had this idea post-pandemic, if I'm able to go and tour that show, to have a different guest with me, a different female artist or female identifying artist, maybe a mother, maybe not. And yeah, the show talked about all of these things, about the things that are going on in the world. I try and work out on stage using fruit and vegetables.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that. Where did the fruit and vegetables come from?
Yes.
And how did you alight on the fact that it was a watermelon is the same weight as a 40-week-old fetus?
Yeah. Well, when I was pregnant, I had one of these apps which tells you about the size of your fetus as it's growing. So but on week 5, it's just a little pomegranate seed, and it grows up until it's the size of a watermelon, which is feels like quite a grotesque thing when you hold it. You go, oh, come on, how am I going to birth that? Feels crazy. So I'd already had this in the pregnancy, but I hadn't thought about using it to make art, because I didn't realize I was going to make this whole body of work. But then when I was working out, I was thinking about, okay, well, I'm not going to go to a gym because I'm at home. What am I going to work out with at home? And it came to me about those Jane Fonda, back in the day, get 2 cans of beans and use them as weights instead of, and of course, these days, there's lots of weight equipment, which is really accessible and easy to purchase and not that expensive for those who want to. So lots of people have gym equipment at home now anyway. But I was thinking, okay, well, if I'm going to use these tins, what else is there? Oh, okay, a pineapple can be a dumbbell. Oh, okay, this watermelon is really heavy, which we know is really big and heavy. What can I use? I'll do these Russian twists with them.
Oh, yeah.
So just working out. And then that turned into a very playful thing, because it's so ridiculous. So it's kind of, Jane Fonda's doing it in a serious way. And Mr. Motivator he is serious, when he's saying, he's trying to be chirpy. And Joe Wicks with his Lean in 15 is both brilliant and also incredibly frustrating. You only need 15 minutes. You've got 15 minutes, this assumption. And I'm thinking, if I had 15 minutes, I'd be sitting down, eating a biscuit, not running around. And it took me a long time to be able to even move my body. I remember my child being 5 months old and thinking, oh, I'm just walking around with the pram. Maybe I should try and run with the pram. And the thought of running at 5 months postpartum was like really like shocking.
No, you see these mums, don't you? There's one around where I live, and she's rollerblading with
amazing
in lycra with this baby that's like 2 months old or something. How are you doing that?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's just utter madness. But thumbs up to the ladies out there that are able to do that and who want to do it and have the energy. And I wish I was that wholesome, but I just, it's not my reality. So yeah, I created these moves, and I was also thinking about, how to use this fruit and vegetable in a real way to really do these workout moves, and then how to make them a bit, to push it into something a bit more mad with a little m. So that kind of madness of motherhood, that cliche of like, you find your keys in the fridge. So there's definitely a lot of that I experienced, where in a colloquial sense I felt like I was losing my mind, but in a medical sense, and of course I don't want to in any way belittle what it's like to have depression, postpartum depression. Of course not. So I was conscious of that bigger subject, and also just for every day.
Sheer exhaustion of what that does to your mind.
Yeah. And the daily domesticity of being at home, of having to constantly be preparing food and milk and washing services and washing little hands and washing faces and setting things up, and feeling like I'd done nothing with my day, when in reality I'd done loads. It's just not the kind of work that I was used to doing. So it was a different kind of work, which made me think about women's work and about labour, the labour in terms of birthing the child, and the labour of what comes under the umbrella of mother's work.
Yeah, and that word labour means work, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So once you'd done Work It Out, how did you then create the next project? A short labour was next, wasn't it? This installation.
Yeah, so it was only at that point, once I'd created Work It Out and had kind of got that on its feet, that I realised how much potential there still was in this project, how much I hadn't yet had a chance to explore through that show, and how much more there was to uncover. It was only at that point that I started to engage in maternal practice on a wider scale, the other artists that were already out there doing it. And the first artist that I encountered was someone that I already knew, called Lena Simmich. And I was looking into her body of work, which is called Maternal Matters.
Okay.
Yes, so she wrote with Dr. Emily Underwood Lee, she wrote a manifesto for maternal performance art, which just really spoke to me. I thought it was really great, and they've both done lots of practice and research into motherhood. Lena Simmich, yeah, she's based in Liverpool, and I know about her previous work, and I knew she was a mother, and I've seen her perform whilst heavily pregnant as well in a show which is not about motherhood. I didn't realise she had this massive body of work, and it was really interesting. I got really engaged in that as the practice and the research of that, and something in my head must have stuck. And I have this umbrella term, Maternal Matters, of all of these works which I've created since. And it's actually a while after I kind of went back to look at Lena's work. I was like, oh yeah, I think I have just lifted that. So that's like an umbrella title, which I credit to Lena. And then, yeah, within that, I started, after Work It Out, I started thinking, okay, well, what other outputs do I want to create, which are not necessarily studio-based shows, but might take on a different form. The show Work It Out, I really enjoyed the section, and it seemed to go down really well with the audience. The Lean In 15 section, where I have 15 exercises that I do with fruit and veg, and I demonstrate them in the show in quite a manic way. Not in a slick, able, buff way of being able to really do it, but in a manic way. So I created a short labour where I had an installation of all of the fruit and vegetables, and I invited the audience to come up with their own exercises using these, and of course come up with a really great name to go with them, usually with great alliteration is what works. But I had a timer which interrupted this interaction for me to go and do some pacing blindfolded. Another part of this practice which I'm really engaged in is walking. I noticed that on maternity leave and since, I have done a lot of walking, and it's a slow thing. So I used to just dash around, drive everywhere because it's faster. And then on maternity leave, I realised, oh yeah, there's no point in getting to the greengrocers faster. My day is going to the greengrocers. You walk, and I don't just dash across the road like I used to. I have to cross safely because now I've got this child in my care that I'm, desperately trying to keep alive.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of take the long route round pavements. And so this walking practice, and it made me think about the walking that I do in the house as well, the pacing, holding a child in the middle of the night and just pacing up and down quite a small space. So walking was something, and I'll return to that when I talk about Carried, which is the audio walk. But yeah, it started in a short labour, this pacing with this interaction with the audience to create these exercises. And then we went into lockdown. Everything changed in the outside world in terms of the arts, the theatres closed. But for me, it actually wasn't that much of a change because I was already at home a lot by choice. I want to put my child to bed. I want to be there to do that. And also, it's an obligation. I have to be there. I need to care for my child. I cannot abandon my child. So I started thinking about how I could make practice from my own kitchen. And it became a much smaller, quieter practice, and one that I felt really in control of, which was really nice as an artist. It felt more about making the art rather than, oh, I wonder how many people have seen this or will see this. I kind of stopped caring about that. And it was really liberating. Really liberating.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I always wonder about that, specifically with performance artists, like how much do you consider the audience when you're developing the piece and the experience, as how they're going to experience it, not just as people sitting watching, but how they're actually physically going to interact with it and the journey that they go on.
Yeah, well, I'm always thinking about that because the audience very much completes the work and can change the work and informs the work. So I am very conscious of that audience. But in this case, they were interacting in a different way because I was posting it on social media.
What were you using?
Instagram.
Right, okay.
And I loved it as a choice because you could curate your whole news feed on Instagram with Joe Wicks and mothers showing you their polished versions of their lives and how wholesome and how healthy they are and how well they're doing. And I thought, oh, this is funny. I think I want to show this and then subvert it, because of course no one's life is polished in that way. It's a clipped version. So I created Lean in 15 on Instagram, and the plan is to extract that so it could be a standalone film to show at festivals. You know, it's directly to camera. It's aware that there's an audience watching, and I can see the likes and the views, but they are not right there with me.
Yes.
But just like everyone on Instagram, you think everybody cares about your life, whereas they do, and also they don't. They're scrolling past.
So did you do it live? Was it like a live stream, or did you record it and then post it?
I recorded it and posted it every day for 15 days, Lean in 15 days in a row. And I made another piece over the duration of Lent during that first lockdown, which was called Lent 40+6, where I ate the fruit or veg, which related to the size of the fetus growing, the 40 weeks condensed into the 40 days of Lent. As a kind of daily domestic intervention. I mean, I deliberately paralleled it against this story of Lent and of this death and rebirth, death and resurrection at the end, where I have a kind of little death and then I'm reborn a mother. And the old me is gone and this is the new me. And I like this idea of consuming the fruit and veg and the seeds. There's something about it being of the body and preparing it as well, you know, washing it and preparing it, that ritual, and that these are like growing things. It's not a bar of chocolate, it's not a packet of crisps. These are things which grow, which are from the earth
and sustain.
So I did that during lockdown as well and documented it every day for 40 days. And
brilliant. And how was that received?
Yeah, I mean, it was great. I had a kind of dedicated following, and it felt really interesting to have people like
tune in.
Yeah, what's it today? What is it going to be? And it was nice to look back at the whole thing as well. I think I was going to say that I learnt through doing that project. When I began making it, for some reason, I'm not sure why, in hindsight, you know, it goes back to the work it out perception of the body and having to reject that. When I began doing the daily 40 day, I made sure my house was pristine before I started the ritual of eating the thing. So I would do it when my boy was in bed, and I kind of realized, I think like one day I couldn't, and he interrupted it. He came into the recording and asks me a question, and you can hear his voice and I answer it. And I watched it back and I went, this is great. Why have I been trying to pretend I'm not a mother whilst making a show about motherhood?
Yeah.
Why am I trying to present this like really clean kitchen? And again, it's this way of, no one's asked me to do this, but I am thinking, I want to show that I have a clean house, that I am together, that I am coping, that, and it's to have a messy house doesn't mean you're not coping.
I guess maybe it's like a thing from when, you know, the health visitor comes around to check you're doing okay.
Sure.
And like you're tidying everything and
and you
got it together kind of thing.
That's it. You want to show that you're in control, that everything's fine. Everything's fine. And I think the more you say everything's fine, is it fine? I don't know if it is. So I allowed this mess of my daily life to creep into it. And of course it should be there. Why am I trying to hide it? So I would let the camera pan down to what's going on at my feet, which would be 30 vehicles, toy vehicles, just absolutely like kicked around the kitchen, because that's the reality. He's driving his little vehicles, and that's fine, you know. Why am I hiding that? And he comes and he asks me questions, he interrupts, and you can hear him in the background. And I realized, oh, he's this collaborator with me on this.
Yes.
And I love it. And then I thought, okay, why don't we open and explore the fruit together? My favorite one is the grapefruit. So I sit him down at my table, I have this grapefruit, and I set the camera up, and it's just on my phone, just in my kitchen. And he's just so excited and thrilled at opening these fruits, because they don't always look like you expect them to look. A mango, a pineapple. He's like, ooh, and you can hear him like, ooh, ah. And we put into it, and he goes, ooh. And we try and eat some. And at first he's like, oh yeah, this is nice. And then the sourness kicks in. And he goes, Mama, there's something in my mouth I don't like. Yeah, me too. I was waiting for the bitterness to kick in. And then on one day I'm trying to open a coconut, and that's not an easy thing to open.
No, it isn't.
A hammer. And I'm hammering away at this coconut, and he's like, it's banging, and I'm banging for like 10 minutes trying to open this coconut. And that's all part of it. Of course it's not all slick and all easy, and that's brilliant. So yeah, I embraced the mess, and I embraced the motherhood, as I should have from the beginning, and it became a different piece, and one where he's really present in it.
It's so interesting, and each one has informed the other, really. You've realized something about the work that you've done previously that you want to explore in the next piece, and then I can see now where Carried has come from and how you've got to that. You've got another piece after that called The After Party.
Actually I haven't made that piece yet, so that's
an intention. You already know that you want to do that.
I had this idea of some sort of mother's retreat, something which is about rest and relaxing, and I'm not sure what that is yet. So that is very much about this collation of ideas, and then trying to think, okay, what will that be? So is that a future project, and where does that sit, and where does that fit? An artist, Tony D. Paul, made a piece of work called Doze, which is about rest as resistance. And I thought that's so important, when I'm saying about all of this work. Hers isn't about motherhood, but of course it translates wider. And I was thinking about all of this facade of trying to show, it's not a facade, but this way of showing I'm okay and I'm coping, and look at me, this capable working mother, and aren't we shiny and great. And actually how important rest is, and to go, I need to rest, and to allow the body to rest, and how to allow the body to rest when you're so exhausted and you're so hyper vigilant and aware of all these potential dangers and risks.
It's incredible. And so Mist sits after Carried but before the After Party.
Well, in terms of the works themselves, they don't run in any kind of chronology, but in terms of when I've made them, I made Carried first, and then the idea for Mist was there, but I did make Mist after Carried, Miscarried. Right. So that's a deliberate thing. So a thing with Mist that I really wanted to explore was motherhood and loss, infertility, IVF, surrogacy, failed attempts at pregnancy, deliberately not wanting to get pregnant through choice, terminations, miscarriage, those decisions, those choices that we either make consciously or subconsciously, or the choices which are taken away from us, or just running out of time to make your mind up that it's out of your hands anyway, freezing egg, having no womb, no sperm. I mean, my work is about motherhood, but I hope it speaks to everyone, parent or not, people who are interested in becoming parents, people who are parents, or people who are not, and also people that have not necessarily had what some would call a conventional journey to motherhood, something which I like to call otherhood. For example, an artist that I've worked closely with has made a show of his own about his single male journey to become a parent as a single gay male. How do you become a parent? So he's chosen surrogacy as his route, and that's so complex, you know, the complexities which come with that. So Mist, it embodies all of those avenues to becoming or choosing not to become a parent, and taking time for that as well. I don't know if celebrating it is the right word, but just having a space where it is there for someone to talk about it or not, for it to be seen, for it to be heard. Whether they choose to speak about it or not is obviously their decision. And in the piece, there's an opportunity to come and sit with me. I'm carving watermelons as a durational labour, as this act. And I do invite the audience to come and sit with me if they want to, but they don't have to. And if they do sit with me, there's no obligation to talk, and I don't talk, I just listen. And I'm still trying to find how best to set that up so that it is an appropriate space for how to do that. I'm still finding that.
Do you find people that do come and sit with you? Yes.
And I found people that came and said nothing but just sat. And of course, you know, the sound of the watermelon squelching and the smell of it is so intense when there's so many of them being carved out. So yeah, they come and sit with me, and other people talk to me about their personal experiences with these issues, and some of them spoke more widely. I had one male come and speak to me through his choice about, you know, what he thought about access to contraception and about females' responsibility and in contraception.
Such an expansive topic, and clearly there's so much room to make and think about different aspects of it. You said start in 2017, we're in 2021 now, and clearly there's so much more that you've got to say and think about with regards to that. Obviously there are very clear parallels between conceiving, birthing, raising a child, and then also conceiving, creating and sharing artwork. You've talked already a little bit about how your practice changed after becoming a mother, but also obviously within the context of the pandemic as well. Do you think you will go back to more of the sort of black box style shows, or do you think it will always now be sort of more durational, almost research-based practice in a way?
Yeah, I imagine it will be a mixture. I don't want to say that it won't ever go back to black box practice, because that's my roots in terms of theatre making. So I'm sure that will always be there as thread. But before this body of work, I made a project called The Dance Collector, where it was very much about socially engaged practice. And there was a black box outcome, but the majority of it was working with communities in community settings and working in different spaces, on a market, in galleries, in cafes. So it is something that has been a part of my practice for quite a few years now. In terms of how parenthood has changed the practice, obviously in terms of the content of the work it has, but I don't expect to be making work about motherhood forever. I don't know when this project will come to an end, but there's so much in it still.
Well, that was I think it's one of my later questions. How do you know when you've exhausted a theme, kind of thing? Like, how do you know that you're ready to move on to a different direction? You just put it down, or do you never really give it up? Do you never really stop thinking about that?
Well, I guess it's when something else inspires me, when something else takes up my thoughts and my actions, my practice, because I didn't intend to make this body of work. I certainly didn't go into maternity leave thinking this would be the outcome. Certainly not. So in fact, I really did think I would take the foot off the gas.
Did you?
Yeah, I really did.
You surprised yourself?
I have, but that creativity is really flowing, and I think that that is encouraged because of the amount of play involved in having a child. I go home from work,
Yes.
and I play, and I spend all weekend playing. That's what I do. It's like
It's so important to creativity. I think we totally underestimate it.
it is, and it's so important that we nurture it in children, and it's a shame when I don't know what point it drops out of a person's everyday life. For now, it's my child leads a very creative, playful life, and I want to maintain that for as long as it can be. And it's a shame, it's something that should be encouraged for everybody all the time.
Yes.
So I don't know when the project will end, and I don't know. I just expect that I'll become engaged in something else, and I don't know what that is right now. But I do know that a thread of the past ghost of all of my practice is like an echo throughout all of my work. Nothing ever comes to a full stop.
Yeah.
It's there. So that socially engaged practice from the Dance Collector is there in parts of this new project, and I'd like to work more with mothers in community settings. I don't know what that output is yet, but I know that there will be something in this thread of work that will do that specifically.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. It's really interesting, and I kind of wondered. Obviously, your practice has changed becoming a parent, but do you feel like there are things now that are off limits to you as a theatre maker in terms of things that opportunities that you potentially could go for, or certain ways of working that you just don't feel that you can do anymore? And also, have you experienced a change in the way potential commissioners or people that you work with have responded to you?
I haven't noticed any changes in how commissioners or venues have responded to me, but I have taken a lot more control over my own practice, and I've allowed it to be slower and more on my terms, so that I enjoy it, because I don't have to do it. I don't need that extra stress. But that comes with a privilege of working a full-time job in a university where I've got an income. So that's a privilege which I have, which I appreciate. Not all artists have, not all working artist mothers have. In terms of opportunities, I mean, for sure, there's residencies that I can't go on, that I'd love to go on, that would have me away from home for a certain amount of time. Although there might be other artist parents that do have a support system around them that will enable them to do that. But I don't at the moment have that. But in the pandemic, because of the pandemic, there were lots of online opportunities.
Yes.
Yeah, I took part in an online residency called Field by Two Destination Language, and it spanned over 2 weeks, where it wasn't for the full day every 2 weeks, but we would connect every day for 2 weeks. And for me, that was just wonderful, because if that was 2 weeks on location somewhere, there's no way I would have been able to go. But because it was from my laptop at home, although the disadvantages that come with that distance connection, that enabled me to connect with artists in a way that I hadn't been able to in a long time. And that experience really helped me feel supported. It enabled me the space to articulate my practice after being, at home, just it all being in my head.
Yeah.
So the benefits of that residency were just amazing, and they continue to hold residencies. Right now they're hosting one in Leeds, which I understand is for people who can attend in person or attend online. They've made it a dual thing, and that's great, and I'm envious of those people on that now, because I enjoyed it so much when I did it last year.
It's amazing. It really, one of the pros of the pandemic has been that people have had to, think about doing things differently, and there has been more opportunities available remotely, which does support working artist parents, doesn't it, really?
Yes, yes. And I mean, I think that there's companies out there that will support every kind of artist and actively encourage and support those artists from working class backgrounds, from artists that are trans, Black. It's brilliant. And Two Destination Language is one of those companies that are absolutely open and encouraging and supporting all artists, as they should, as all artists should be supported.
Definitely. So have you been through what you've been through, and having gone on that amazing residency, have you got any sort of tips for other working artist parents who might be struggling with finding that balance between making work and nurturing a child?
Yeah, well, my advice would be, where possible, to carve out time specifically for that. So it's about being disciplined and making sure there's time for that. I really noticed making that time, and I really enjoyed that time. I welcomed the break from motherhood to be able to go and do it. And it made me think about how I had let my practice slip in terms of priorities. And I thought back to when I was through my teens. I used to practice the piano every day.
Yes.
Practice the piano, practice the scales, practice the arpeggios, practice the pieces that you're working towards. And if you don't practice, you lose your competency at doing it. I thought, well, it's the same with making performance, with making art. You have to practice it. So I would carve out a time which was specifically for me to be practicing. And I might have gone into, it might have just been my kitchen, but that's my designated studio space, or it might go into a black box space if you can access one. And sometimes I would go in with set tasks that I wanted to do, and sometimes I would go in with no idea, and I didn't know, but I would go and I would sit and I would think and I would write, or I would listen to podcasts, or read something which I knew would be creative. I read Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic.
Big Magic, yeah. Great book.
It's so good. I recommend it to students all the time, and they look at me blankly, and I say, eat, pray, love. And it's like that whole generation has passed now, and those 18-year-olds don't know what eat, pray, love means at all. But Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic was just great to read. And what I took away from that book is about making the idea, whatever your idea is, just create something from it, because even if it's no good, it's better than not doing anything.
Exactly, because sometimes that inspiration leaves you, and once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah. So like embrace it, have an outcome, and don't worry about
permission. She talks a lot about permission, doesn't she?
Yeah. So I love that. So carving out time is what I would say to other parents. And
how often did you carve out time? Was it like a daily thing, or sort of like 2 or 3 times a week?
It was weekly. It was every Wednesday. Every Wednesday afternoon was the time that I carved out for myself to do that, as a definite. And of course, there were other times where I would, listen to podcasts whilst walking, and other creative things. But specifically to be to dedicate to my practice, I did a Wednesday afternoon. But I also embraced that repetition. For me, it worked, that repetition and domesticity and mundanity of parenthood. I embraced it, and it fed into my work. That's because it was key. That's not necessarily going to work for every parent. In fact, I read something that, do you know the actress Jemima Kirk?
Yes.
I love her so much. She said about how she hates playing with her children. I love it. She said,
I don't think many parents that say that.
Yeah, she said, I can't stand playtime. And I thought that's so great to admit that and to say that out loud. And that doesn't mean you're a bad parent. And of course, you still love your child. I thought that's brilliant. I can't stand playtime. We spend all this time playing, and I'm trying to make it interesting for me. And really, I'm just bored. I'm bored, and it's okay that I'm bored.
I was reading quite recently about how female artists who became mothers in the 60s and 70s specifically would almost be ashamed that they had kids, and sort of want to completely separate and looked at their art as a completely distinct, separate thing to what they did with their children, and how their experience as a mother fed into their work. It was like, no, that's not what we do, and it was sort of frowned upon, really.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that, and I kind of feel that a lot. When I was younger and an artist and thinking, I want to have children, and I always knew I wanted to have children, and I felt like it wasn't the artist thing to do.
Yes, it's weird, isn't it? The artists have this like personality. It doesn't, being a mother doesn't fit with that artist personality, which is supposed to be your own world kind of thing.
Yeah, and it felt like a really conventional thing to do. Like, oh, right, you're just doing that.
You've gone up a mountain, you're about to come down a hill. I've had that so many times.
So I kind of struggled with that, because I am an artist, and I want to like feel free and liberated from the rules of daily life. But I also, on the other hand, my body, my womb is talking to me and saying, I want to have a child. I want to nurture this thing. And of course that's just me, and I mean, I'm sure it's not just me, but that's not to say that you're in any way unfulfilled if you choose not to have a child. Of course, that doesn't mean that. But yeah, I certainly felt like, oh, I feel a bit embarrassed to say I'm having a baby. It's such a strange thing.
Yeah, it is strange, but I think, you know, time has moved on, hasn't it? And as you say, people are much more sort of open to working artists, parents, and acknowledge the child or the children in sometimes the workspace and part of the work itself.
Definitely. And I mean, again, I have that dual feeling of going, well, for me, it is about the repetition and the mundanity and the domesticity. But there's also this artist part of me that's saying, don't just make work about domesticity, because being a woman is more than that.
Yes.
Of course it is. So don't just make work about that. And my response to that is that I do try to bring in some of the grotesque and messy and trying to find the right words, but the grotesque and the messy versions of motherhood, and not just the cheery, wholesome, this like, oh, I did something bad, and the bad thing that I did is actually not that bad. But I do try to incorporate the riskiness of it, the risky things that mothers feel and think and
put themselves through
and do. Yes, and that they're still human, and they're still okay, just like every person is complex.
But that's so interesting that you've got that conflict, and I totally recognize it. Why would you not make work about what you know? Why would you not do that? And then when you start to do it, why do you start second guessing yourself? Why do you start saying, oh, that's not good enough, or that I shouldn't be doing that, I should be doing something more avant-garde or disruptive? It's so strange as humans why we do that to ourselves, why our brains think that way.
I don't want to just recreate or reaffirm a narrative which is already out there. I want to find something different to say. I want to be brave enough to say something different. I want other voices to be heard through my work. It's about making new spaces in existing fields. So within motherhood, to go, okay, well, where can I push the boundaries of what the conversations are within this, to make sure that it's not just a white middle class voice who's had a conventional journey to motherhood that's being heard and explored.
You're definitely doing that. And so what's next for you then? Is it this after party show, or have you got, has something else come out of Mist, or is it the development of Mist?
Yeah, I mean, it's the development of all of these works really, about how I can get them seen more now post-pandemic. So trying them out more, finding what they are through doing them. So I've only shown Mist once, and it was a kind of cocktail hour in a late night arts cafe, and I think that works in quite an interesting way, and that can sit perhaps in different festivals. I should say that the audience make a margarita with the watermelon flesh that I'm carving out. So there's this kind of moment of participation, and that they are consuming this labor that I am doing. So it's a kind of cocktail hour, but which is disrupted by this content, which of course that's not the time or place. Well, is it the time and place to be talking about fertility and miscarriage and abortion, or is it not? That's where is the right time? Yeah. So
where is the right place to do it?
Yeah.
And who with?
And who with?
Sometimes it is short to strangers, isn't it? Or through these sort of lateral connections.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah, I'm hoping to take this piece, well, it's my intention to take this piece to a gallery in Preston, the Burley, that I have worked closely with, a fabulous group of artists. Oh, and actually this is quite a nice tip for parents, to find new networks to meet with people. So I met with the artists at the Burley before this project when I was doing the dance collector, and it opened my creative thinking to new ways of working. I was used to,
because it's a different practice.
Yeah, I was used to working in a theatre and a performance network, and then I stepped into a white box space with artists that work in fine art, and they just had a different conceptual way of thinking and just different conversations. And it was a refreshing way to rethink my practice. So it was.
With that. I'm always telling people, look outside your industry for inspiration,
and of course the collaborations that can happen there as well are just going to be so fruitful.
Well, that's interesting. Let's finish on networks then, because I'm also a mother and an artist, and I sort of looked at what was there around when I became a mother, what was there around that I could connect into, that I felt understood what I was wanting to do, which was continue to make work, but also having the responsibility of raising a child. And there wasn't a lot out there at that time. It's about 13 years ago now, but a lot has changed since then. And I've noticed on Twitter that there are quite a few networks within specific disciplines, theatre being one, where they are looking at support networks for freelance or employed artists who are also parents. And I just wondered, is there anything like that in Lancashire, and do you think that there should be? Does it have to be theatre specific, or could it be cross discipline?
I think it could be cross discipline, because those different voices, different experiences are a great way of, like we were just saying, a great way of meeting different types of creative people. So yeah, for me the cross-discipline thing is a plus, and certainly helps in terms of making work of going, okay, here's a designer, here's someone who could play the accordion, I need that in my chair. It's great. A network that I found was Mothers Who Make. Their meeting was in Manchester, at home in Manchester, and this is pre-pandemic days, we could meet in person. So that was great, and met lots of people there and had interesting conversations, and bumped into people that I had known from the past, and I was like, oh, they're here, they've had a child, so have I. So that was like nice.
Was that like just a chat, or did you have like speakers, or was it just a case of talking about what you were all working on and trying to find connections?
It was both. They had a guest speaker, and then there was also the opportunity for everyone to talk just for a couple of minutes about whatever their practice was. And then there was time and space for you to talk with other people there if you had wanted to ask them more, or you wanted, you know, to make a connection. The guest speaker was Kathy Turner, when I went, who has a practice in walking. So she works a lot with Deirdre Hedden. And this, of course, as I was saying, inspired a lot of my own practice. So this notion of motherhood and walking. So for me, it was, I was just so engaged. And I suppose it was also really stimulating for me to be able to take my child to something and sit and listen to something which was engaging for me. And then there's a brilliant company called Villages, which is based in the north by a Lancashire-based artist called Claire Doyle and Georgiana Cardoso Zarate. And I can send you their names after if that helps.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So Villages by Claire Doyle and Georgiana Cardoso Zarate, where they have created this organisation which supports women with children. It offers peer support, and they're working towards a suitable space for women to work alongside their children. Claire Doyle is a great artist, makes really interesting work. She's not a mother, but she explores motherhood through her practice. And in her show in 2020, it was called Will I Lose Myself in Motherhood? So she was she's thinking about motherhood without being a mother, whereas Georgiana is a mother, and she's coming at it from the perspective of lived realities of motherhood. So Villages is a brilliant northern.
I like obviously if we talk about it takes a village, is that where it comes from, perhaps?
That's where it comes from. And
so where are they based in Lancashire?
Well, they're just northern based, is what they say, but Claire Doyle is a Lancashire based artist. Georgiana makes sculptures and Claire makes paintings, performance pieces, live art.
That's really interesting. I didn't know about them, and obviously I'm interested to know more.
Well, that's like an ideal thing for someone like me to have, that organisation which is specifically for supporting parents and that space
who are artists. I think there's going to be loads of people that will be interested to know about that.
Another artist that I thought, festivals like Lancashire Encounter and Making a Mark, they're great also because they show work during the day for artists to present during the day, often work which as an audience member you can bring your children to. I think for me, having now gone into this world of parenting and theatre, of course it's tricky in terms of how to go to the theatre in the evening. I want to see as much performance as I can, and how to show my work on an evening is difficult. But I've been thinking about it, and what is a venue to do? Are they to put on shows at 2 p.m. or 5 p.m? Are they going to sell enough tickets for that? I understand the difficulty and the tension in that. But I went to Relaxed Performance during Manchester International Festival, and I thought, this is good. And it's not made specifically for parents. That's not the intention, but it can be, and I thought, actually, this is quite good. I could have brought my little boy to this. And I went on my own, and I enjoyed being in a relaxed performance just because it was relaxed.
That's important because, if our children are being, as soon as they go into the education system, their exposure to creativity is becoming more and more limited because of the way that they're cutting the curriculum. And the only way really to keep that going is if you have a parent that is into that and it shows you that. But if you don't, it's up to venues and festivals and people who act as showcases for work to think about what will make parents comfortable enough to bring their children and what will make children comfortable to be in this space.
Yeah, so more relaxed performances could be an answer to that. Also, as a parent, I think about, first of all, the cost of the tickets is okay for me because I have a full-time job. But how accessible is it for other parents? I don't know. You know, so I think the making it more accessible via cost to working class audiences is really important.
Yeah.
And then for me, the shows that I like to see the most are the ones which are entertaining for my child and for me.
Yeah.
And, you know, I take my kid to see the Gruffalo and that's fine. But I also kind of just get bored of these like puppets. Like it's not really interesting for me. But I've taken my boy to see loads of really interesting things. I took him to see a show called I Pet by Bonty Hand Theatre. And the tech in it was really clever. And of course, the tech's gone over the kids' heads. But for the parents, I was like, that's actually a really clever thing. I'm trying to work out how they're doing.
How they've done
the
it,
tricks, how they're interacting with this multimedia.
Yes.
And I took him to see Limited Celestial Space by Igor and Moreno, which is more of a kind of experiential, it's not an end-on show, it's more of an experiential installation. But that works really well. He enjoys that, I enjoy that. And that for me is a winner. There's a live art for the curious of all ages festival called Haphazard in Manchester that Word of Warning put on. It's called Haphazard, and the tagline for it is something like for the curious of all ages. So I've taken my boy to that before. So it's live art, it's really engaging for him and for me, but it works for everyone.
I'll put links to all these things that you're mentioning in the show.
Yeah, absolutely. But for companies or venues rather to commission and programme interesting children's theatre, interesting for them and for the adults.
And for parents, I definitely think the experiential thing is really important, especially for young children. It's such an important topic. I think we don't talk about it enough. This side to our lives as artists that take up like most of our time when you're squeezing the art in between. And so I think it would be lovely if something was to out of this discussion where people maybe thought about getting together and creating this network for artists in Lancashire who are parents. Because you know, so many aren't, but so many are. Find support, to find collaborators, new opportunities, I think would be really, really interesting.
Let's do it.
It might be part of the next phase of your Maternal Matters, although Arts Lancashire would definitely be interested in supporting something like that.
Well, I'd absolutely be up for that because you know, I support all artists. I go and see as much work as possible. I absolutely support women and now working mothers as well. And so it's something that I'd absolutely be interested in.
Okay, well let's talk further about that outside of this podcast. Well, thank you very much. It's been really lovely to talk to you.
Thank you so much. It was great, and it's actually there's something quite surprising to hear about how big that body of work is without me going into it intending it to be that way. It's quite a surprise for me to hear my own words.
What I like about these podcasts is it allows artists to actually reflect in a critical way about what they've been doing, and perhaps sometimes realizations pop up during the course of the conversation that they perhaps haven't really given enough thought to or had a chance to give thought to before.
It feels like a real accomplishment to kind of look back and go, look at what I've done when I didn't even intend to do that. And that kind of makes it feel more organic and more authentic, but that's how it developed.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for listening to The Gathering. If you like this episode, let us know in the reviews, and don't forget to share it with your friends.
For show notes, links to all the organisations and initiatives mentioned in this episode, and much more, head over to www.artslancashire.org.uk/thegathering. You can also follow us on Twitter @Arts Lancashire.